Here you are looking at the page. I think Shannon already shown. We have 21 regions and it's keep growing. We have 63 available zones is the data centers in these regions, right? So why, I may ask a question, why the number here is bigger than this number, right? So you may have this question in your mind. So I'm going to introduce the concept of the available zone in more details. So that's the reason we call the data center available zone, because availability, especially the high availability, is a very important and a very critical aspect every IT company really care about, because they definitely want to make their IT infrastructure stable and always be available to their customers, right? So naturally, Alibaba Cloud using the available zone, which means the different data center in a different location, to give our customer a natural capability to maintain a HA infrastructure. HA means high availability, right? But to implement the high availability, usually you have to compromise before the cost and the redundant resources. Honestly speaking, if you want to be more HA, you have to have more redundant resource, which means if one resource is broken, another one is still alive, right? That will make the percentage of your availability even higher. But the more resource definitely means something else. It has some disadvantage, which will cost you more and which will bring you more communication efforts, right? And management efforts to maintain the different resources. So it is always a pros and cons. But anyway, we have the available zone there, and you can plan something like that. If you put your resource redundantly in different AZ, you have a better HA capability, and you can do more capability to do the disaster recovery, but it definitely will bring down your network latency. It will bring down your performance of your application because you have more network latency between the different resources. But if you care about the performance more, you can just put everything in the same zone so that they can communicate very fast, right, between each other. But you were losing something like the HA and the disaster recovery possibilities. So hope you understand the concept. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat box. And now you have a basic understanding about what is the zones, available zone. But what is the region? Region is more like a real geographic concept. So China is a big country. So we have, I think it's 9 regions in China. And also we have, let's go back here. In this picture, you see global wide, we have different regions, right? In the different countries and the major continent, right? And here in China, we have several regions here. Now you can see from one region to another region, usually it means physically, it is a long distance, right? It is a long distance. That is why when you look into this picture, I'm telling you that when you create a resource in Alibaba Cloud, the first question you need to ask it by yourself is, which region I want to put my ECS in? And the second question is, which available zone I'm going to put my resource in? Okay, that is 2 questions you cannot avoid. Alibaba Cloud, we have to know where you are going to put your resource. Then I'm going to create that resource just based on your decision. For example, if most of your customer is coming from Singapore, maybe you can consider to put your resource in Singapore region and in the Singapore zone A and build up a ECS there. But if some of your customer or major customer is coming from China, you may want to put your ECS in China region and in the China Beijing zone A. Beijing region, not China region. But another follow-up question is, now you have resources maybe in one region and some resources in another region. can these resources communicate with each other? Definitely, they can. But then you need to think about what kind of speed and what kind of cost I want to set up this kind of communication. You can communicate through the internet, you can communicate through the VPN gateway, and you can communicate through Alibaba Cloud. CEN is called the Cloud Enterprise Network. You have different ways. I may not go into the details, but in the future, if you want to have a big picture in your mind about your resource location and the communication globally, think about this picture, okay? There's a essay examination question being asked usually in the test. They will ask you in the same region between different AZ, what kind of communication network will go through. I would say usually we say it goes through the private network, which means the communication between the two AZ in the same region, the package will not go to the internet. It is contained in the internal network or the private network. But if you want to communicate through one region to another region, because you need to go a long journey, you have a lot of different choices, okay? That is one key point you want to learn from this slide. Okay, now you have the basic concept of ECS. Now let's look into another concept about instance. So instance, and I said, most of the cloud resources is provided an instance because instance is human being naturally friendly. Just like you go to a market, whatever market it is, you want to buy a book, you want to buy apple or orange, you want to see something in a good shape and can be maintained and owned by yourself, right? So ECS instance is something like that. If you buy a ECS instance, it means you are buying a virtual computing environment and the whole. When I say and the whole, it means in this environment, it has a CPU for the computing, it has a memory for instant message storing, it has some persistent storage like the cloud disk to maintain the long time data storage. And also we have definitely the SIP network for you to connect internally or externally. So remember, instance is just the way we provide the service. And our billing model and the charging model is also instance-based, okay? But regarding the instance, it has to be a lot of different specification, right? Similar like, again, when you go to the food, the fruit market, you want to buy the apple, you want to buy the orange, but definitely you see a lot of brands and a lot of choices, right? The big apple and the small apple, the sweet apple or the not sweet apple, right? So for the ECS instance, we have the similar concept. You need to consider what kind of specification for my particular instance. But for the ECS instance, the specification mainly talking about the size and the CPU and the memory, the performance. Okay, that will be the specification concept. So here, this is just one naming convention about instance. This is a generation, and this is the size of your ECS instance. Generation means this one may be a little more advanced, just like your children and your grandchildren. Each of our next generation, I believe they get evolved, right? They become smarter and become, definitely smarter than the parents. And the size means sometimes you need to consider your business needs. If you don't need a very much CPU and memory, and you can use a small size instance to gain some cost and performance balance, right? Now I'm showing you this picture. This is give you more details about the specification, right? If you have more IT background and if you were a graduate from the electronic engineering or the computer science, you may have another concept is called this one, right? CPU has a different architect. CPU is a central processing unit. is a small chipset, right? That can calculate the things very fast. But the CPU also has some different architecture. The commonly used architecture, which usually we are referring to the Intel or the AMD, right? Their CPU is called x86. This is kind of common design concept and architecture. And our ECS is based on, most of the ECS is based on this kind of x86 architecture CPU. But even based on this kind of CPU, we can still have the combination of the number of the CPU and the number of the memory size. Based on the different combination, we have the different type. Some of the ECS are good for the general purpose, and some are good for the big data, which may need to process data a lot. And some you can use them for the faster speed, so you can give them more memory, right? And some of them you may want to install a database inside, and you want to have a quick and fast cloud disk access. It is input and output optimization. You can using those kind of ECS. So all in all, you can look into this picture, and in the future, you can just pick up a particularly specification and a combination of the CPU and the memory to make sure the ECS you choose is very suitable to your business. Okay. And I talked about the ECS, right? And I talked about the x86. Now let's look into another very strange family. I say it's strange because we call them the heterogeneous. Heterogeneous is not x86. Okay, it is not x86. It is different CPU architecture. We give them a name like GPU. GPU is graphic processing unit. FPGA is a field programming, I forgot the name, full name, but it is a different chipset. But why we need something besides x86? Because GPU is a very special chipset. It is very good at something like this, the so-called the machine learning, the AI technology, right? So you can see they can do the deep learning and the scientific computing, very good, our very specific computing area. And if you have an FPGA, we will recommend you to do something like this one, the real-time video processing and recognition. For example, like the photo or the picture transcoding, right? So remember, pictures processing, videos processing, transmission, transcoding, FPGA can do a better job, even faster than the x86. Okay, two concepts, the general purpose x86 based and heterogeneous computing. Alibaba Cloud can provide both. And based on your business scenario, you should pick up the one which is more suitable to you. Okay. And the last tab I really want to introduce is we so-called the bare metal one. The bare metal, from the name, you can see it is something combine the advantage of virtual machine and also the advantage of physical machine. So they have both side advantage. They don't have some other virtual servers. They don't have any, performance lost, because usually from the hardware to virtualization to the virtual server, you have to lose some performance through the middleman, which is the virtualization layer. But here you are looking at instance, very strange instance. They don't have any performance lost, but they still have all the benefits and the virtual server. It is elastic. You can create, you can upgrade automatically, and they have all the automatic operation and management features. So we call them the bare metal instance. Bare metal is so special, and I'm going to give you some scenarios so you can have a better understanding why we need this stuff. So bare metal, they have something other ECS cannot do. First scenario is it is very secure, which means bare metal can support a very special data encryption and decryption, including the CPU instruction decryption and encryption. with this kind of feature, is called the Intel Celeron SGX feature enabled. The bare metal scenario can make sure the CPU instructions passed down from the ECS level is also encrypted, which means even the hypervisor layer, they cannot look into your data and instructions here. And it make all your transmission in the virtual environment is very secure. So some of the banks, some of the insurance company, they really care about this feature. It's called the encrypted computing, right? So we know, generally speaking, we encrypt data, but in this feature, we encrypt computing itself. We encrypt the CPU instructions. It makes the whole, whole data cycle very, very secure. This can only be done through the bare metal instance. Another very significant and unique benefit from the bare metal instance is, we call them the revitalization. Remember, every ECS in Alibaba Cloud, it is being simulated through a virtualization layer, right? Which means we don't recommend you to run any other virtualization software in the ECS, because ECS is already a virtualized one. If you run another virtualization software in the ECS, it will make the performance really bad, maybe not acceptable. But with bare metal instance, you can do that. You can run any other virtualization software like Zen, like KVM, even the famous VMware and the Microsoft Hyper-V. You can run all this virtualization in the bare metal instance, and you still have a very good performance. Why we want to do that? Because some of the companies, maybe your company, they already running some virtualization in your data center, and you don't want to change too much to your current infrastructure. So you can have this very creative way. You can just migrate all your existing infrastructure to the bare metal instance directly, right? Because you don't need to change your current virtualization layer, and just put it on the bare metal, and you have everything on the cloud. Really interesting, right? So remember, this is another scenario only bare metal can do. And with the bare metal instance, you can even organize something called a supercomputing cluster. With that cluster, it is really recommended you to use it in the some scientific institute and a scientific level of the huge volume of the data and the computing scenarios. Okay. Let me stop here for a quick pause. Let me do a quick recap. So in the previous training, we introduced about the concept of the region and the available zone, right? So region is a country, kind of country level concept, is a geographic location. And available zone is designed in each of the region to give the customer a natural capability to do the high availability and disaster recovery design, right? And after that, we'll introduce the ECS instance types. So ECS instance types is based on the CPU, memory, those kind of specifications. And regarding the CPU type, you can consider two major different choices: the x86 based CPU and heterogeneous CPU. Besides the x86 and the heterogeneous CPU, we introduced another very special instance. It's called the bare metal, right? The bare metal can do the third-party virtualization. They can do the CPU instruction level encryption and decryption, and they can even use the bare metal instance to organize a super computing cluster to give you the extreme performance. Okay, so because the time is already past for 50 minutes, I'm going to stop here and give you a break for 10 minutes. So let me know if you have any questions. Just shoot it in the chat box, and let's take a break for 10 minutes, and I'm going to come back at 10:30.